Okay, y'all seeing the presentation? That's cool. That's cool. And
looks great.
Thing. There.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Yeah. I'm ready. Are we good to go?
Yeah.
All right, then. I'm going to kick us off. So, this is good news coming to you. The news that hopefully you want to hear. Howdy. I'm Ben. I'm going to talk about the parts of the project that I focused on for the most part. So, I built the front end of the app. I did a lot of work in Django, routing to our views, like the landing page, the index page, and some other pages. I worked on since our product's good news, we wanted to be showing news that is good by some measure. So I worked on communicating with IBM's tone analysis, which gives us back tags for text that tells you whether it's happy, sad, things like that. And for the sake of debugging, I did a lot of work with adding logs, and they proved to be very helpful.
Yeah. So like my partner said, he handled a lot, like all of the front end. Actually, I have much appreciation for that. And helped basically did the initial setup with Django. My role was more on the back end side, and I guess in the meat of the like scraping section. Although really, all like the only source that we're actually collecting data from is the Guardian, but we set up a whole like cool infrastructure where we can just like tack on new scrapers as we build them. And then logs, debugging, deployment. That was probably where I devoted most of my energy. And so what do we have next for you? Why?
Why good news? Who needs good news? All right. So we are consumers of news, and if you are too, then you may notice that whenever you go to a news site, the vast majority of the content is probably not good in your perspective. Like, maybe it is, but a lot of it has a bunch of negativity in our perspectives. There are websites, web apps that show you news that they think is good, but we felt like that sort of approach is really lacking in features because of the subjectivity of what is good. We wanted to be able to provide our users with the ability to send us some of their data so that we can give them customized feeds based on what they might think is good, rather than just some things that some people say are good. So that was a goal of our project.
And I guess the other thing that has actually proven, like, ultimately we wanted to learn about stuff. So we decided that we wanted to learn about interacting with like more APIs. APIs are pretty cool, and like get better at Python and build from like top to bottom, bottom to top, build the whole thing. So with that in mind, we were looking for a project that would fit those qualifications. And one day I was reading some news and it was really depressing. And I was walking outside and I was like, "Hey, that would be a cool project." So I called Ben and it proved to be actually it hit those marks and it felt inspired on some level, which was nice. It made it more interesting to work with.
Great timing too with all the recent events. We feel like there's probably more demand for good news in the world, given what's happening in it. All right, we'll move along.
So how we decided to go about this. Initially, we had a very large infrastructure, so we had to scale that down. And we knew we had to scale it down. By the time we got to the MVP specification, it was like, all right, most of this stuff can't be here. This isn't feasible in 2 weeks. However, what we ended up with was actually very similar to our MVP spec. The only thing that's not here is the Redis cache, which I'd still like to work with just because it's a neat thing, but I don't think we really have a need for it yet. But we have these services running that are, one's performing like data collection, another one is performing like language analysis, article analysis. And then we have Django running, doing like a lot of work. Actually, Django handles a lot of stuff, and interacts with our database. It provides an ORM for us, and it attaches to Gunicorn, so it can act as an app for the WSGI server. So connections that are made through Nginx get passed to Django, and then routed to the appropriate place. It also provides an API with an API endpoint for our language processing service to send like updates to post articles to. And those are, do you have anything else to say about this one that you want to share?
Just some like design decisions. Like we use SQLite because it's built into Python, and we figure that like as we are considering new features for our app, our app is still very much an MVP, and we have we'll get to what we want to do a little bit more in the next steps. But SQLite is just, it's very easy to work with, very disposable. It just seemed like something we didn't have to worry about too much. Part of a nice thing about our architecture is our services, how we structured them. They're like communicating over sockets, so we could theoretically be putting them on different machines, which is, it's nice for scalability because that's something we had some desire to focus on, but we'll go over those a little bit more in some code snippets. Just to throw that out there, the front-end tech we used was like HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, jQuery.
Good stuff.
All right.
So these were the services that were depicted in the last slide. These are two separate processes. They're managed by systemd, so they launch on system boot, and one of them is actually run by a timer. So we have a timer unit that activates every 15 minutes for the scraping service so that it will send requests out to collect data. And that's where like this loop starts. It loops through all the clients and makes like a request for data. And if it's successful, then this gets passed over a socket. A message gets passed over a socket that at the other end, the language processing service is listening to, and that's just always running. And when it receives a message on that side, it is like, oh, hey, like, okay, I'll process this. And the message that it receives, at least for the time being, contains a file name of a temporary file that we create in the scraping service. And it's like, okay, I'll read this file. It reads the data dumped as JSON into the file, out from the file, and loads it in. And then it sends back some information. Was there an error? Did it succeed? Was it bad JSON? And based on the response that the scraping service receives, it either retries or like breaks out, goes to the next client. And yeah, it was a neat thing to build because they're independent, but they work together, which was kind of neat. It was Ben actually wrote the one on the left too, and I wrote the one on the right. So it was like they had to like come together. It was cool.
In the spirit of like MVP development, probably would have been simpler to like combine them into a monolith. But yeah, we'll speak to that a little bit more in a minute. We found these sections in particular to be particularly interesting, like working with sockets, working with like multiprocessing, so that we could be like sending requests to IBM in parallel, and that was really interesting to us. So part of the trade-off of like feature development and learning. All right, we got a couple more code snippets to share. I'll speak to the first one. So we did not write that much JavaScript, really. Like, this is the entirety of our JavaScript, and since it's so simple, I'll just describe what it does. The first time you go to our page, we look in your local store to see if you've been there before. If you haven't, we redirect you to our landing page, which is just our about page with a extra little message in that prepend section there that says, hey, welcome to the site. If you actually want to see the content, click here. And then every time you go to the page after that, you won't see that. You'll just go to the index. You won't be redirected unless you go to a different browser, go to incognito, or clear your local storage. So that's what that's doing.
This one on the other side is just a Puppet manifest that prepares a server with Nginx. So every time we release an update, if Nginx isn't installed, it'll install it. It'll make sure the service is running, and it will load in our site configuration using a source file that's stored in the directory in our package. So we can, we just click enter on a deploy script or hit enter, and this takes care of like getting everything in sync. Or this and a few others, but yeah.
So we had a lot to reflect on, and we've already touched base on that a little bit. Like our thoughts coming into this project were more, hey, I want to learn a lot of stuff, than hey, let's build a product with a bunch of features that someone will love, and it'll be a great MVP, and it'll showcase everything that we ever dreamed of. But yeah, we wanted to learn new technologies, so we were like, hey, let's use Django. The Instagram uses it. It must be scalable. It must be great. But, well, after working with that for a little while, we were like, wow, you really got to learn this Django ORM. And that's not exactly where our interests lie. Our interests lie a little more in the Linux domain, like getting sockets to hook up, systemd services. So in retrospect, maybe it would have been better to go with a backend framework that we already know and love and is quite simple, like Flask, just for like serving API endpoints. We didn't even want to use like third-party like applications like Django REST frameworks. So that was just another headache setting up our own Django API endpoints.
Yeah, Django is really heavy, and I feel like it feels different than Flask. It feels like a kind of like a different class of tool. And I would prefer not to use it, actually, in retrospect. I feel like it's doing so much that I don't know how to debug it well. It's taken over too much of the the design. So I either need to learn it well or drop it. I also would like to expand our scraping services and implement some sort of containerization or and caching. Those two things stand out to me as like goals, But in retrospect, I think one thing that I would really like to point out is that I noticed that a lot of you, or at least some of you, have like expressed that an awareness or a concern for like we were pressed for time, and we wanted to do this, but we knew like we couldn't do that kind of thing. And I think that both of us kind of realized that like we weren't doing that. And like, we had that realization part way through, and it was like, I guess at least for myself, I think that's kind of like a weakness in terms of like being able to develop a product. Like, it's nice. I think it would be very helpful to have like a product manager, or just to spend time trying to get better with that. Like actually sticking to like, here are the, like the points and the deadlines that need to be met. Learning experience for sure.
Yeah, totally. We had like some nice planning phase set out, but after we built it, we kind of didn't use it so much after building it. So I've come to realize the value of planning things and scheduling things, especially because like after this whole year at Holberton, feeling a bit of burnout at this point, and being able to break things into like small tasks that like I know what I'm doing. I shouldn't just be distracting myself, having fun learning about sockets. Like being able to like have like plan out some tasks that I need to do to make progress on the project that is real would have been a very useful thing to do.
So I think we got a little bit of like a sample.
All right, next thing. All right, so here's an image of our page. I will switch my sharing to our actual page and show you some more about what's going on. And then we can get back to the presentation. So here's our page. Voila, there is no good news. It doesn't exist. Well, that's probably just because we killed our database like a day ago. We're filtering out all the coronavirus related things, and the IBM tags and how we're handling them are kind of sus. They could definitely use some tuning up. As mentioned, we might move into using some other ML things to get sentiments from, so that because we even had some issues of running out of API calls. But to show you the first visit redirect thing that happens, I'll just clear my local storage and reload the page. There's nothing in my local storage, hooray. So now when I go to good news, it redirects me. Looks kind of funky, but you'll see that it would appear this is your first visit to good news. Click here to go to the main page. If you refresh, you're not going to see that anymore, because that's just there that's what makes a landing page a landing page. Otherwise, it's just about. So this is our about page. It's got some stuff on it. We can go to home, and yes, there may be no good news, but we implemented some filters. So what this thing is filtering out, it filters out every article that was tagged with fear or sadness or anger. And apparently a lot of articles are pretty have those in it, and it shows the rest of them. So yeah, eventually there will be some content there. Might take days or weeks. But these other filters like joy, it just will show you every article that was tagged with joy. And yes, keep in mind all the coronavirus things are gone. So we have 2 articles, there's a duck, seems like it could be a joyful thing. There's a game review, seems like it could be joyful. And then there's this no filter, which just shows you all the non-coronavirus related stuff. And yeah, it's got some stuff in it.
No coronavirus. I don't see it. I don't see
coronavirus.
No, it works. Awesome.
So this is a really rudimentary way of filtering based on sentiments. We did get magnitudes with the sentiments, with the IBM thing, it would exclude sentiments that had a magnitude of under 0.5. So that's why a lot of them just aren't here. But that's a feature. There's also one other thing that if you visited our site, you wouldn't be able to see. Since I'm logged in the admin site, I can look at a profile view. It's a work in progress, but this just exemplifies our commitment to making users and have some, yeah, this is definitely in the works for us.
Cool. So yeah, that's pretty much what we have to share. For examples of our database or our data before we killed the database, you can look at our other slide, or I guess we'll share the image.
Yeah, I'll get back to the slides then. Yeah, now we are at next steps.
Yeah.
Presento.
So next steps, find a better way to filter sentiments. I mean, we are doing some rudimentary analysis of what the data we are getting back, but like honestly, the IBM Cloud, they call it the Natural Language Understanding API, but it doesn't appear to understand like the relationships between words. Like at least the examples that I saw, it was kind of disappointing in that regard. Like prepositions threw it off, and I think it would be really actually useful to find something else. The thing is, the Google Cloud API also doesn't give back specifics. It just gives back like 1 to 0 or 1 to 0, I think. So we need another solution. That aside, we also would like to implement a few more features. So maybe we'll do some bad filtering for a while and just like build up our collection of our collection of sources and our like user features, so profiles and sentiment customization. But our infrastructure works, and I think we can like kind of leave it where it is for the most part, other than moving away from Django, and that's also optional. How do you feel about that?
I feel like moving away from Django would make and using Flask, which I find really simple personally, would allow us for more time to spend on feature development. That would be great, and maybe if we could get like some open source machine learning models that do sentiment analysis for us, so then we don't have to worry about running out of API calls, and maybe we could even tweak them to get tags that we want more, because I think we both have a bit of experience with machine learning things. So those would be directions to head in. I'd also really like to separate the back end from the front end. I'm not a big fan of this the back end template rendering, and then it's just in my opinion a lot nicer having like React style, where you can have your code logic with your components, and I like that workflow of like just requesting data from the back end, getting it to the front end, then re-rendering what you need to re-render. It was a bit of a pain using jQuery to connect with Django templates that were rendered on the back end. So I think splitting the back end and the front end would simplify things for us and allow us to build a nicer looking product more quickly.
Seems reasonable.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's all we have.
And
well, thank you guys. We have time for one question.
I have a question if no one else does, but if there's a student with a question, that's okay too. Or maybe we can sneak two. I'll be fast. How about that? So I was really interested in when you said that your scope originally was really big and you had a lot that you wanted to learn. And looking at the project as it is now, there was still a lot to learn. So what was that process like for you, limiting your scope, and how did you make those decisions on what to keep and what to get rid of while still maintaining an infrastructure that could be scalable?
Let's see.
So
Yeah, go for it.
I'd say we built things as we needed things. Initially, we had a lot of things that would have been nice to have, but as we were building this thing, we realized we didn't really need them and we didn't have time to build them right now. So I think that was really how we transformed our project from hey, let's build the most scalable production ready app ever to all right, this is turning into more of an MVP with some non-MVP aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, I had a lot of trouble modeling like a typical OOP relationship in a relational database, and I could have spent a very long time actually digging into the Django ORM, learning how to do that, but it just didn't seem worth it. So we ended up with a database that I was like, this isn't optimal, but it works, you know. And we cut out a few other components as well. Yeah. We still got the SSL certificate and the load balancer and the web servers, though, so I'm pretty happy about that. You know.
Yeah, overall, it's still a very all-encompassing project, even with the simplicity. It's still not that simple.
Fair enough.
You still have stuff going on, yeah. And then I saw Pierre had a really good comment. Flask and Express are really great to focus on feature dev. This is also why I preferred not opting for Django this time around. Very reasonable. Cool. Any other questions? If not, I'm going to stop this recording before we do our closing statements. So one moment.